No mai haere mai ki Quite Simply Politics. Welcome everyone back to another episode of Quite Simply Politics. I'm your host, Holly. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Today, we are talking to one of the junior whips of the Labour Party. He's also the MP for Northcote, and he's the chair of the Transport and
Infrastructure
Select Committee. Welcome, Shanan Halbert.
Tēnā koe.
Thank you so much for being here. Do you know that you're the very first tāne we've had on Quite Simply Politics?
Oh, I'm honoured.
We've had 4 guests so far, all wahine, and you're the very first tāne. So thank you for joining.
It's going to be fun.
Yeah. Now, you were saying to me earlier that this is the very first podcast you've been on.
This is my first podcast.
How is that so?
I'm not sure. I just haven't come across like people that have the equipment and... You know, like it's a step up from my little selfies and vids that I do on my Facebook.
I do. Okay, we have to talk about your videos on Instagram, right? Because you definitely do a thing which I had to teach myself not to do, which was have the little look at yourself when you're looking at the phone and before you start talking. We got to work on that a little bit.
Okay. I'll take that on board.
Talk to me about your time in politics, because you've been the MP for Northcote since 2020, is that right?
Since 2020, so it feels like a really short time, and at the same time it feels like a really long time.
Yeah.
My first campaign was in 2014, where I found myself involved in the Labour Party. I think David Cunliffe was our leader then. Wow. One of the hardest elections ever. So baptism by fire, and then I really enjoyed it. And so 2017 I came back, stood in Northcote against Minister Jonathan Coleman at that time. 6 months later, lo and behold, we found ourselves in a by-election, so I'm the candidate for Labour there. And each campaign that I went through did sort of really, really well and chopped down that vote share that the opposition had. Coming into 2020, of course, and so that was 3 losses for me. And so coming into 2020 was really my time to take it. It was a make or break situation, and walked out the other side winning by 2,500 votes.
2014, that is quite a long time ago. Did you think that you were going to be able to like stay steadfast and keep going on that political journey?
Or be single.
Well, yeah, okay.
But I grew up in the Hawke's Bay. I think I knew then, looking back, that I wanted to be a member of Parliament. I hadn't even experienced Parliament at that time, but I knew the importance of leadership, and that I had some sort of drive within me to be, a great organiser, to try and motivate people, and that eventually took me into the Labour Party, and then to be now the member of Parliament for Northcote. So, I love my job. I'm really proud of it. And you can't take anything for granted, of course, but I've done a lot in my 3 years that I've been elected, but plenty more to do.
Do you get tired?
It's really weird. So a lot of my volunteers say to me, when do you take a break? When I take a break, it's usually sort of on a Sunday. But if I have too much of a break, I feel quite deflated. And it's interesting that when I come back on a Thursday night from Wellington in Parliament, you feel quite exhausted and drained after that. To go out Friday, Saturday in particular in my community, that fills up my cup. I get re-energised in order to go back to the house on Monday for a Tuesday sitting. If I don't do enough out in the community, then my energy levels are weirdly low. And so I don't tend to need too much of a break, but I do need to get out there and do what I do well.
I feel like you're always out and about. That's why I wondered if you get tired, because I feel like you're always doing stuff.
I think that's a mix of things. I love being out and about. The work that I've done in our local schools, of course, that's my passion, is when I get to hang out with our kids and young people, to talk politics with them, to talk about my journey, their journey, and hear what's important to them. That really motivates me. But it probably comes with, losing an election 3 times. That's quite motivating. But you know, with that is the endurance to play the long game in politics, and that's what I've always been committed to. I knew I wanted to be a member of Parliament, but it was going to take me a longer time to get there. And I guess when we look ahead, you know, and the opportunities and the contribution that I think I can make in a future government, you know. It's the long game for me.
Yeah.
I'm really happy with where I'm at. I'm doing the mahi in my own community, and people recognise that. And then to get experiences like the transport and infrastructure work, which wasn't a place that, you know...
that I forgot what it's called.
I did almost 20 years in tertiary education, because my whole kaupapa was about pathwaying young people into higher learning, just like I had, you know. And then I found myself campaigning on transport, found my passion in it, saw the change that it can create for people and communities, and then infrastructure came with that. And you know, suddenly I'm the chair of this committee, doing lots of work in that, and then getting real wins on the board like half price public transport.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a massive commit. Like, they do a lot of important mahi, right? Long term mahi. What's been one of the most interesting parts that you've learned being the chair of that select committee around the portfolios?
So when I started, I probably underestimated the role that transport, infrastructure, housing plays in our day-to-day lives, for the good or the bad. I really have taken away from that the role that transport in particular plays in reducing our emissions and our commitment to climate change and getting on top of that. You know, I've gone from being a car user in quite a large car in the big smoke of Auckland to something much smaller and increasingly using public transport. And I guess that's the step change, that if every individual in big cities like Auckland can use public transport just a little bit more, you know, then that's going to reduce our emissions. 43% of New Zealand's emissions are made up from our transport network.
Really?
That's significant. Second largest contributor.
43%?
43%.
What's the largest contributor?
Primary industries.
Okay.
And so we hear a lot about that, right?
Okay.
And so you would have heard about He Waka Eke Noa and the work that's going on in there. But when you go, oh, okay, we drive our car and, you know, we get around Auckland and we don't think about it too much. And as Māori, you know, something that's important to me is our environment, our taiao, and yet the single biggest thing that we can do is change the way that we get around our city.
Yeah. Your Māoritanga is very important to you, and I know that. Do you want to explain a little bit about your journey from being sort of in the grassroots where you're from, then coming to Northcote and making that choice to stand and run there versus back home, you know, because there's all those competing priorities, right? Especially as Māori. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I love being Māori. I'm so proud of my whakapapa. I come from Rongo Whakata down the east coast on my Halbert side, and then from our Bennett side, we're inland in Mōkaipātea, Ngāti Whatikopeka. My dad was a freezing worker down in Hawke's Bay where we grew up, and then at the age of 42 learnt te reo Māori and retrained as a teacher when the works closed down. And so that absolutely transformed our family's life. I'm the youngest of 5, and so education wasn't a thing. You know, Dad was a seasonal worker. Mum worked at St. Joe's. Mum worked at Pack and Save. And so our upbringing was, you know, pretty humble until such time that I guess I got the best parts of Dad's life with te reo Māori. We had that connection. We went to the marae more. And so I've really loved and appreciated that. And with that, it's given me a much stronger identity of who I am, you know, and that brings bravery and courage in the role that I now play in Parliament. But when I look at a seat like Northcote and the North Shore, our Māori demographic is smaller than the rest of Tāmaki Makaurau, say. But I like to think that our community loves that we have a Māori champion there that can cover, you know, not just general bases, that can cover issues, but actually can bring a Māori perspective and lens across how our community operates. values, the Māori values, I guess, that come into play when it comes to people and communities. And so, my kaupapa has always been about being a Māori, demonstrating Māori leadership within a mainstream environment. And I'm really, really proud of that. And whether that's in Northcote or whether that's in Parliament, or whether it's, because there's not too many Māori that are in transport and infrastructure.
Kia ora.
That unique perspective that you can bring alongside everything else. I like to think that people appreciate it. But, at the same time, people are confronted by that sometimes, but we have to play a role where we bring everyone together in this beautiful country of Aotearoa, and that, I celebrate both sides of my whakapapa, my rongo whakaata whiti kaupeka side, and my mum who grew up in Fielding, blonde, blue-eyed, beautiful woman.
Kia ora. We have to touch on something which I became aware of recently, which is, I think, potentially becoming more problematic in politics in modern Aotearoa, and that is you recently were called a racist for being Māori hard, proud of your whakapapa, and that's something we should all celebrate. What went through your head when you got called racist?
It's so odd because, this is the pigeonholing of my Māori whakapapa or being a Māori politician. I'm the MP for Northcote. I represent everyone in my community, and that unique Indigenous perspective that I bring is an added value to the role that I play. I found that comment quite confronting. It was in response to a comment that I made about some of the ACT Party policy being quite scary. The reference was to request that oranga tamariki should be colourblind. But what we know from research, of course, is that the strength of what we know from research, of course, is that when children grow up knowing who they are, where they come from, and their identity, that overcomes the challenges that they have of being in state care. Research has told us that time and time again. So why would we want oranga tamariki to be colourblind? It's just not realistic. We want our children to grow up stronger than ever with the values and identity under their belt. Similarly, a confronting time was the Posey Parker situation. I chair our Rainbow Caucus, and that was quite confronting because I turned up to the protest or Posey Parker's presentation at Albert Park that day, and I had the sign that said "All of Us." Because I truly believe that it is about all of us, whether we put that in a Māori context or whether we put that in a rainbow context. We're a country that is built on, diversity and inclusion, and those things are really, really important to me. What came out of that day, and when I was called a racist by the ACT Party, is that you get all of these emails coming through or messages on your Facebook calling you these very harsh names. And I've never experienced that before. So that is the confronting part, that one person can say this and suddenly you're a racist, or I stand in solidarity with our rainbow community to support our trans whānau, and suddenly you're anti-woman.
What was the experience like at that Posey Parker event? Like, take me to the day. What was it like?
So it was confronting on a number of levels because on one hand, this was a person visiting our country. It was a staged event to talk about a particular issue. She knew at the time that it was going to be met with a challenge from the rainbow community in New Zealand. In fact, that's probably why she did it. It was in a very small public Albert Park.
Albert Park, yeah.
When you attract thousands and thousands of people, not just for her, if you're going to run an event and you're a professional speaker, then you have an obligation to set up a professional event with the right health and safety standards in place. Yep. In my view, that wasn't a safe environment for anyone, whether it's for our rainbow community or, some of the accusations about some of the violence that happened against women that were there. That is not okay. But that's the responsibility that, in my view, comes back on Posey Parker for running an event in a public place when you can easily have the conversation that you want to with people that want to hear it in many of Auckland's event centres. But standing there on that day, I had an expectation from our rainbow community to stand in solidarity, to be seen, to be supporting them at what is a very challenging topic at the moment. I went up the front. I remember going right up to the front. I did see the tomato sauce thrown.
You did?
I did.
Oh my God, you saw it!
I was there. I don't know if I liked that. But because I wasn't there as somebody who... I didn't feel angry towards Posey.
Right.
I don't agree with her statements.
Yeah.
But I wanted to be there to demonstrate that solidarity with our rainbow community because it's them that hurt.
Yes.
It's them that hurt from the things that she says. And in my leadership role, you know, it was important for me to stand with them that day. But I go back to my sign and what it said.
Yeah.
All of us.
Yeah.
And I truly mean that. Truly, truly mean this is about all of us.
What do we need to do to move the conversation into a better space, do you think?
I acknowledge the pathway for women in this country. You know, what we have currently is the standoff between two marginalised groups in our history. One that's has been quite progressive. And then particularly for our trans and intersex whānau, you know, they haven't made the progress that I've made as a gay man. They don't have the opportunity to live in the same way that I have because of the progress that, you know, people like Georgina Bayer have carved for me. They did that. But now it's time really to open up to support one another. Yeah, I think. And we need to stop fighting each other and really understand what's going on at the moment. That's the challenge that we have in front of us. And when we talk about the protection of women in toilets, which is one of the core issues that some women have spoken up about, is sharing bathrooms with trans people. And that's only because we have gendered bathrooms, right? Yeah. So in our society, we've grown up with male and female bathrooms, and we don't acknowledge other people. We haven't created bathrooms that are available for everyone, and suddenly that's entrenched in our minds that that's the only way it should be. So we've got to keep on pushing that agenda in society and say, hey, okay, I appreciate that women deserve their space and they've fought really hard for it, but not at the cost of trans women. No. Not at the cost of trans women. And so that's what we've got to do more of.
Kia ora. You said that you weren't particularly a fan of the tomato sauce incident, which made me giggle that what happened, and I sort of thought you brought it on yourself because you're in a public setting. Talk me through why you were not a fan. Do you think that we should more use our words, or did you think it was over the top, or what did you think?
Posey wanted it to be over the top, right? And so these are the images that go up on through media. And in my view, when we stood there, it was quite a relaxed, energetic protest that was there, but that kicked off, I guess, some of the aggression and the violence that we saw. And so times have changed where we're actually trying to get a message across, and when those sorts of incidents happen, they distract from the message. What we wanted to achieve that day is strong representation from our rainbow community. What I saw was incredibly positive. And really there's a lot of music playing, people were dancing, it was happy, it was everything that the rainbow community stands for. Sadly, that particular action did distract from that. Right. Yeah. And then from there, it elevated some of the altercations that took place. That wasn't right. But again, those altercations took place because that happened in an unsafe environment that should have been event managed well, and it wasn't.
That's a really good take. In terms of, as well, media is going to paint a picture that
With
serves...
tomato sauce?
Yeah. That serves their purpose, right? And so it's interesting to see when you're on the ground there, your experience versus, say, what I saw just from reading in the media. They sound quite different, right?
Yeah. Well, we turned up trying to demonstrate a message of positivity and love for everyone, including our trans whānau.
Yeah.
That's not the message that Posey wanted to share, but,
No.
you know, I'm a true believer that love will overcome all. And so that's the message that I'd hoped that we had achieved, and for many it was. I saw so many allies come out that day in solidarity. It was awesome, and I just think our country's at this, you know, precipice of. We've always been proud as New Zealanders to be progressive, you know, to really care about everyone, to care about people. But I go back to our kids and think, you know, there's an increasing number of our rangatahi who grow up identifying outside of being male or female, or with a different sexuality. Yeah. And so we just want to embrace that. Yeah. We want to support that. Because at the end of the day, what they do in their personal life, what they see themselves as, that's what actually matters. Yeah. Because we want them to grow up being strong. Yeah. To go and be educated, to have a good life, to be employed, and to raise their own families with good values. Yeah. And so that's where my commitment is.
One of the things that you spoke about in an event that I had the privilege of attending, where you were speaking at, was around the growth that your party had to do following Foreshore and Seabed. And you stood there, and it was at a predominantly Māori audience, and you said that after the Foreshore and Seabed Act, the party itself had to take stock. I have never heard anyone explain in such detail, so articulately, how it was a time for the party itself to take stock. Do you want to share your view of the growth that your party's done since Foreshore and Seabed?
So this is a really good example where I'm comfortable in uncomfortable spaces. Yeah. And this is another one, is I've committed to Labour because, you know, my kaupapa is about being Māori within mainstream and influencing what I can. All of us were confronted by Foreshore and Seabed. All of us were hurt by it. Yeah. In fact, it was, I think, the first big protest that I participated in.
Oh, really?
And I loved Helen Clark, and still do. But that was one of my first experiences with politics, and I just didn't quite understand it. When I came into the fold in 2014 in the Labour Party, there were some people that had left the party. I think there were still internal grievances at that time that we wanted to overcome. Yeah. But it was where, I guess, a lot of members felt embarrassed, whakamā, about what had happened in the past. And that was a reaction to politics, right? To brash in that time. And not too dissimilar to some of the things that we're seeing currently. But the party had to go through a process of reassuring its Māori members that they were up for this, that we really believed in te tiriti, that we wanted that embedded in our constitution, that we wanted the party to be a place where Māori didn't have to scrap for outcomes. Aye. You know, we've done that for so long.
Aye. Aye.
And when I look back on my decade in the Labour Party, we're different to what it was when I came in 2014. It's my colleagues now that raise Māori issues. Yeah. It's members in there that when our Māori caucus gets up to speak at a conference, you know, everyone is there. Yeah. Everyone supports us. And that doesn't mean, you know, we're getting everything right. there's a hell of a lot of work to do to support Māori. But everyone understands that if Māori does well, the whole country does well.
Yeah.
And what a great thing for us to be known as a country on the international platform, that we are the ones that have supported our Indigenous people to do incredibly well. And we're stepping in the right direction, but there's so much more to do. And at the same time, that concerns me walking into October. All of the mahi, all of the pathway that has been set up, when we think of things like the Māori Health Authority, when we think about representation on Māori wards, 2 examples, only 2 just there, as well as the investment into whānau in times like COVID and the pandemic. We've learnt so much from that. We're starting to see the benefits, and it's got to continue. And in my view, I am very concerned that is at risk when we start to look at such a right-leaning government potentially coming into play in October.
What would you say to people who are unsure, tossing up all of this stuff, especially those with whakapapa Māori?
Wake up. We've got to appreciate where we've come from in the last 5 or 6 years, what our people have gained, and we've got to come back to partnership. And this is where I ask for Māori, and also, that those that have a Māori heart in this country, that we need to work in solidarity to maintain the progress that we have made over the past 6 years. And yes, when we start to talk about the investment in Māori, hitting $1 billion each budget, we not only want to see more, but we want to build on that for our generations to come. We want to see more people like you and I in leadership roles. We want to see communities doing well. And so that's only going to happen if we continue to invest in doing the right things, where we start letting Māori make decisions for themselves and giving them the resources to get on and do what they do best.
Kia ora. Yeah, totally agree. Now, Mr. Halbert.
Yes.
Politics and your career, where are you going? What's the ambition? Where's your pathway? I know that you're going to be committed to the citizens of Northcote from now until whenever, but what else do you want to see happen? What else do you want to achieve? Have you got any pet projects?
After such a long entry into actually being elected and on payroll, I feel like I've come an incredibly long way in the last 2.5, 3 years. I would have never thought I would be a government junior whip or the chair of transport and infrastructure, sitting in a podcast like this, or sitting on a stage, at New Zealand's largest infrastructure conference, with colleagues that have far more experience than I do. So I'm so grateful for the opportunities that I've been given, both under Jacinda Ardern's leadership and more recently under Chris Hipkins' leadership. I like that these opportunities being passed on to me probably reflect that people have confidence and faith in what I do. My primary responsibility is to my constituents in Northcote. I haven't achieved what I want to in 3 years yet. There's so much more I want to do. I feel like I've just started. So that's where my commitment lies. I'm open to anything that my boss, thinks I'm up for. And the great thing in this job is you just keep on being past challenges. And you're given the chance to rise up to them. And I like to think that in every opportunity that I've been provided, that I've risen to that occasion. Man, I'm so excited about the future. We've just got to get through this election convincingly, form a government that is going to work for Aotearoa, and then get on with the more mahi.
Get on with the mahi.
Get on with the mahi. I love politics, but then I don't love politics because I just like getting stuff done.
What was the biggest challenge you've most recently been past that you had to sort out? Is there one that comes to mind? You said that you love being past challenges by your colleagues. Is there anything that's come up recently that you're like, yeah, I smashed that challenge?
There's never a dull day, right?
Yeah.
How you plan your day is never how it works out.
Yeah.
What I love about being in the junior whips role is probably the pastoral care that I get to provide to the rest of the team. The coordination, which I really missed, going from working in tertiary, leading really large teams, to just being backbench you when I started.
Yeah.
It's a cool opportunity to get in behind the rest of the team. And there's 62 of us, so that's a heck of a lot of people to support. And in politics, recently we've had some real challenges put in front of us, both for individuals, but change of leadership, and your job is to keep your team upbeat, keep them motivated, most of all, keep them focused on what matters to New Zealanders.
Yeah, especially in an election year.
Yeah, because dramas will happen, and I think when a drama happens, I'm like, it'll be fine, we'll get through it. And, we just need to support the team in a pastoral care way in particular to keep them focused on the mahi and what matters to New Zealanders. And I guess the challenge that I really love is turning up to the house each day, leading the team in their interactions, sometimes their noisiness, but we're up for the fight, man. And I'm so looking forward to it.
What is it like being in the house? Can you explain it for our listeners?
The house is this crazy place that reminds me so much of watching a Harry Potter movie.
Why?
Because you've got all these characters, right? And you see them in media, and they do play out in the house.
Yeah.
The weird thing for me is that you've got this setup, what we call democracy, which is all good and well, but it's not designed to work together in any way. It's designed to be adversarial towards each other. And I love working with people and partnering up, and I'm from the coast, that's what we're like.
Yeah.
But this place is designed, to be government and opposition. And once you learn that game, you've got a role, we've got a role to talk about what the government is doing, the achievements that we've made for New Zealand, and to counter the noise that comes from opposition. The opposition's job is to say that the government is doing nothing, not doing well, under-delivering, But at the end of the day, I stand by everything that I do. Never have, since I've been in Parliament, have I felt uncomfortable about what I've been doing. I've felt heard, I've felt consulted, I've felt a part of the conversation and the decision making. Yeah. And you're a team at the end of the day, and it's only through being a team, that you get wins on the board.
When you think about Parliament with, government on one side and opposition on the other, is it actually super adversarial for you when you're in there? Or do you think it is just part of the pomp and ceremony of politics?
It's theatrical, right?
Yeah.
And I was never really good, but I loved performing arts at high school. Yeah. And so, that theatre that comes into play, I found myself to be a really good heckler.
What do you heckle?
To my surprise.
What do you heckle?
We could have a couple of practice runs.
Okay.
Negative national.
Is that what you heckle? What's the other one? The coalition of colonizers. Yeah,
cut.
Oh my god.
Yeah, and then you get actions, and you're like, cut.
They don't show this stuff on Parliament TV.
No, you can't quite see it. But that's the fun of it too, because, I'll give my mates across the house heaps, and they'll give me heaps. Yeah. We both stand up for, our own patch and what we believe in. But I like that we can walk out of the house and, shake hands and crack up at each other.
Yeah. Who's your biggest mate on the other side of the house?
Frenemies.
Yeah.
Frenemies.
Oh, well, who's your biggest frenemy?
Frenemy. I spend a lot of time with Simeon Brown.
Oh, yeah.
He's like your little brother that keeps on piping up, right? Because Simeon's the transport spokesperson.
Oh, of
He's really
course.
energetic. He's quite good at heckling himself. And there's a bit of respect with players like that. Because I think so many people in Parliament actually work really hard.
Yeah.
I think he's wrong a lot of the time. But
Fair enough.
I like to think that there's stuff that we can probably achieve together.
When you talk about respect, I get the sense that a lot of these fundamental things that you hold strong have come from your pāpā. And you shared when you did your maiden speech, your journey into politics and the impact that your pāpā had made and how he held on right till your journey of being elected.
Yeah.
Do you want to share a little bit about that? Because I think it's one of the most impactful stories I've ever heard about a parent being there for, an aspiring politician and then making it right to the very end.
Yeah, like my dad was always my biggest champion.
Yeah.
Ever since growing up, we just had a very strong connection. He was the person that I could confide in the most.
Yeah.
When I came out, for example, he was one of the people that I told, and he didn't completely understand it, but he was always full of love.
Yeah.
Love and generosity and humility, and so that's really what I've applied to all of my life, but particularly politics. He campaigned with me since 2014. Every campaign he'd be up there, come up to Auckland, do the mahi with me. In one campaign in 2017, he had this crazy truck that we decked out with signs, and his job was to drive around the electorate, beep, and probably got in the way of, so many people driving. But he was so much fun.
Yeah.
And for anyone, when you've got that backbone behind you, you're well supported in what is a very challenging environment. And for anyone who goes through a campaign, you're going hard, but you're constantly asking yourself this question, am I good enough? Am I good enough? Am I good enough? Because you don't really know all the time where you're going to land. Yeah. And you've got to believe in yourself. And you can only believe in yourself if others believe in you.
Yeah.
And so my dad was like my rock in that sense. When I lost the 2018 by-election, he was broken just like I was, because we had worked so hard and lost that by-election by 1,000 votes, which is such
tiny.
A small amount. Yeah. And he was the one that says to me, I want you to keep going in this. And after that, you don't really know if you can. And if anything, in politics, you do have these moments constantly where you come up and are questioning yourself and can you go further? And, that voice and the words that he gave me at that time was, you got to keep on going. He's a true believer that leadership is service. It's not about me or about you. It's about how we serve others. And so I took that into that election. Dad was diagnosed with cancer, I think 2 years prior to that election. And he became very unwell in that 2020 year. Yeah. It was terminal. And so he started deteriorating quite early in 2020, losing weight. And at a point, he ended up not being able to eat, have a kai as normally, and you really miss that as a whānau. Dad was always a really active man, and so when you see your parents deteriorating in that way that, he was of a good age, but he was up doing a run every morning. Yeah. And, I can't run. But, it's sad when you see your parent deteriorating like that. But he stayed there right through until election day. Yeah. And you remember that the election day got pushed out because of COVID.
That's right. That's right.
And so we thought, he'll be with us for election day. And then it got pretty tough in the final weeks prior. And the Thursday before the actual election day was the last time I spoke to him. And I said to him, Dad, I think I've got this. Yeah. And he couldn't speak at that time. But I knew confidently that probably I was going to be the MP for Northcote, and that would make him happy.
Yeah.
And sadly, early in the morning on election day, I got the phone call to say that he'd passed. And so, that was really odd. And life is tough when you lose someone that you love so much. And I felt the greatest sense of loneliness that I have ever felt in my life, not just on that day, but the years after that period. Yeah. To have, my champion and my best mate not with me.
Do you believe that he was holding on for that day to see sure that you're there?
He was definitely holding on.
Yeah. Oh, Papa. What do you talk to him now sometimes? You think about him? Does his mana come through with your mahi?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah. In the good times and the more challenging times. Yeah. I always reflect on what he would tell me to do, which is keep going.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't worry about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and it's even things like, as you said, sharing a kai. All the things that we take for granted when we can do it, and then you can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he was the warmest, generous, and most humble man, that I've ever known. And so I like to think that that's how I will live my life. Quite opposite to politics sometimes, but I think I can pull it off.
Oh, kia ora, Papa. We're heading towards the end of our amazing podcast. It's been great to chat with you.
Kia ora.
Is there anything in particular that you would like to leave the listeners with before we do the bowl of bravery? And I know that you've been looking at this eager to get stuck in. But is there anything that you want to leave the listeners with?
If anything, I'm asking everyone to reflect on the last few years. We're at one of the most toughest times that we've seen in life, in my lifetime anyway, whether that be financially, whether it be that event after event, difficult times have just compounded themselves. But I like to think that when we really deeply reflect on what we want for this country, that it comes back to supporting people. And if anything that I can ask this election is that people make that decision about what is going to support our whānau into the future. How are we going to set up a future for our tamariki that is far beyond the life that we have in front of us at the moment?
Kia ora. Love that. That's a powerful message. Thank
Kia ora.
you. Now,
the bowl of what?
Bravery.
Bravery.
Because my kaimahi and I put questions in here, and you never know what you're going to get, okay? So when Deputy Prime Minister Carmel came on, she didn't give me her word that she'd answer the question in case it was a dodgy question. Fair enough. But every MP has been, she answered the question. She got an easy one, so we put a couple more harder ones in there. But every MP has been game thus far. So the question is, are you happy to take a question from the bowl of...
Happy to take a question from the bowl of bravery.
And are you going to answer it? Or just... Okay, let's say...
I'm not important enough yet to not answer it.
Hey, no, you can. I'll give you that leeway, but there you go. Okay, so read it out.
If money was no object, what would you do all day? And I'm quite clear on this one, and it's the thing that my other half is most scared of. I would be happy being a house husband at home working for charities. If we didn't need to pay the bills, I'm good staying home, working for charity, doing my community thing.
Yeah.
Making other people happy.
I love that.
Yeah. Might be single though.
Anthony, don't hold it against him. No, amazing. Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here on the podcast.
Tēnā koe tuahine. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really, really appreciated it. And I'm so looking forward to seeing what happens at the election. Go well in Northcote.
Thank you.
Campaign hard.
Yes.
And I'm sure that I'm going to see you out and about on the election trail. If you would like to get in touch with Shanan, he's got all his social medias, including Instagram. As you guys know, you can contact him, and I'm sure that he'll be more than happy to help. Make sure that you subscribe to Quite Simply Politics to keep up to date. Obviously, we have new episodes coming out every week. It's been my pleasure to have you. Thank you.
Tēnā koe.
Kia ora.